You are listening to a Difference for One podcast, episode number 38. I'm Michelle.
I'm Nicole.
I'm Charisse.
And I'm Cami.
We are the English sisters.
We come together to share life-changing methods of improvement through a variety of topics.
We hope that above all, these discussions will help you feel that Jesus Christ is making a difference for you, the one. And we also hope that our podcast will inspire you to find simple ways that you can make a difference for one. Hi guys, this is Cami and Michelle here today. We are going to be talking about money. Before we started recording, Michelle and I were having a little conversation about what we'd be talking about, and Michelle mentioned 3 mentalities that you can have with money that I thought were really interesting. So Michelle, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so if any of you are fans of Jody Moore, she talked about money in one of her recent podcasts, and this was something that she brought up, and I really liked it and wanted to chat with Cami and have our own discussion on these different kinds of mentalities. Okay, so the 3 different views of money are the scarcity mentality. These are the type of people that feel like there's never enough money. I better not give it away because I may not get any more. I'm terrible with money. I can't be trusted with money. I just let my husband handle the finances because he's got it figured out. The people that feel like money is a burden and a struggle and a stress. And this can be people at different times of their lives. You can feel this way at some times and then other times feel better about it. But the scarcity mentality can feel like you're burdened and stressed and stuck. And so it can be challenging at times. And then the second kind of mentality is where it's totally an analytical thing. It's just numbers on a page. My husband is an accountant and he was doing some work from home today. And I come in and I'm talking to him and he's like, hold on just a second. I'm doing a $6 million transaction thing here. I just need to focus and finish it up. I'm like, oh, $6 million is a lot of money. And he wasn't even thinking about money. Like he doesn't think about it as $6 million. He's just thinking it as numbers that need to be processed and figured out and corrected and done exactly right. And so I think that this is kind of a neutral way to think about money where it's just numbers. If you take out the emotion and the stress attached to it, you can come to a neutral position in your thinking about money and how, okay, this is how much money we have coming in and this is what our expenses are. And let's just do the math so that it all works out. If nothing else, just have a very analytical perspective of it. And then the third mentality is the most positive one, that there's an abundance of money out there. There are always more ways to make money and that you have a love of money and not love in you're greedy and you just want to get more and, oh, money solves all my problems. Money is amazing, but in a more healthy mentality, a healthy relationship with money. So Jody Moore said, love is saying, I respect you, I appreciate you, I value you, and I don't expect you to make me happy. I love you for who you are, just the way you are, and I appreciate what you do for me. And we can have that mentality with money in our lives. There's plenty of money to go around, and if we have that positive outlook where we can just have good feelings towards our money, then we can come to a place where we're not so stressed and concerned about it and it doesn't become such a burden in our lives. And instead, look at positive ways that you can make little changes to improve your financial situation and see how, if you're married, how you can work through it in your marriage as well. Because in marriage, it can be really stressful if the money is not going well. And I can tell you that I've never met a couple that hasn't fought about money in their marriage, but there has to be a point where you come to agreement on how you're going to spend the money and decide together as a team what your financial journey is going to look like. Look at the long-term perspective as well as the month-to-month perspective of what your money's going to be like. That's super crucial in a marriage. 35% of divorces end because of financial problems in the marriage. And so you don't want to be one of those statistics, but choose to have money bring you together and have it be something that lifts you up and empowers you in your marriage rather than tearing it apart.
So do you think it's bad to have a neutral mindset about money? Do you think our goal has to be to see it abundantly or to have a positive outlook, or do you feel like it's okay to just look at it neutrally?
I absolutely think that it's okay to look at it neutrally, especially if at this point it is something negative, it is something that you struggle with. Seek first to come to a neutral place with it and seek to see the positive parts of it. To say, although we may be in debt, at least we have a roof over our head. We have our basic necessities met, and at least we have the opportunity to use the credit card if we have to just give it a positive, neutral outlook, head towards positivity. A good way to think about that is utilizing the thought cycle. It's all about our thoughts. How do we mentally view money? The way that we think about it is the way that we're going to act out our financial situation in our life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I really loved that our mom taught us. She always used the phrase come from abundance. She said that all the time. And I feel like that really instilled in me and probably a lot of us an abundance mindset, because before recognizing that she was saying that, when I would think about money, even just like from babysitting or whatever, it always was as a scarcity. I would think about college and whatever else I had going on in my future. Like, I will never have enough money. I'll always be needing to get more money in order to cover my needs for my life. But after she said it so many times and I thought about it more, I realized it really is just a perspective thing. Like, money is relative. Like, having a lot of money just really means having more than someone else, you know? And so it doesn't really mean anything. Money has no meaning until you give it meaning in your life. And so I just love that she taught us that, because it gave me permission to give money a positive meaning in my life, no matter how much I had.
Absolutely. And I have that same perspective from her. She is the one that taught us to always be giving, to make giving a natural part of life. And I would sometimes be like, but we have, like we don't have this and that. And, things are tight for us. Why are we giving this money away when we could use it in these other positive ways? But she always knew the importance of giving and seeing the needs of others and putting that before her own needs. And I absolutely think that it is a legacy thing. She taught us the principles that her dad and mom taught her. And they were amazing with their money. And, they left a legacy. Not only did they leave an inheritance for their children, but more importantly, they left a legacy of good, positive outlook on money. And her dad taught her, it's not my position to ask what somebody's going to do with that money. God has asked me to give, and then that person is responsible for how they choose to use it. And that really helped me too, because sometimes I'll be thinking, homeless guy begging on the street as I stop at this light, what's he going to do with that money? But that's not my place to ask. And so that's something that I learned from mom, who learned from our grandpa. And so as I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking not everybody has that kind of legacy to look back on and fall back on, but every single person can decide that they are going to be the legacy. If they don't have it, they can be it. They can start a financial legacy for their children in monetary ways, but also in the way that they teach their children and grandchildren and pass on a legacy of a good relationship with money, positivity when it comes to money, and always giving and always saving and always budgeting,
We'll be back after this quick break with a message from our sponsors. Yeah, I think that's really true, that you can definitely take on, and most people do take on the mindsets of their parents, but that you can change that narrative for your future generations. And that just reminded me of body positivity, or the way that we view our bodies, and how children are really watching us. And I think it's probably the same with money. Like, if you're looking in the mirror, the way that you talk about your body, whatever it is, like, I need to lose weight, or whatever, like, I hate my wrinkles, whatever it is, your children notice those things, and they notice the way that you carry yourself when you have those mindsets about your body. And I'm sure it's the same with finances, not only what you say out loud, but the way that you act towards money, even subconsciously, like if you're paying for something with cash at the grocery store, like the way that you carry yourself with your money. I don't know if that makes sense. So do you have any thoughts on like what kinds of things you would want to avoid saying around your children, or how to make sure that you can give them a positive mindset?
For sure. I've thought a lot about this. And I don't know that I could say all of the things that you should say or shouldn't say. And that's different for every person. So you kind of have to just seek inspiration, really, for you personally. But for me, something that I tell my kids a lot is we don't go into debt. Because they'll say, "Oh, mom, I'm going to have this babysitting job next week. Can you buy this for me now? And then I'll pay you next week." And to me, I feel like that's teaching them that I'm the credit card, you know? And so I'll say to them, when you have the money from your babysitting job, come back and buy that thing, because I don't want you to be in debt to me, because I don't want you to learn that debt is a good thing. And although I'm not going to charge you an interest rate, credit cards will. And so that's something that we often say, but more positively today, even my husband was off work. And so we were sitting down just having a natural conversation about tithing and our budget for this upcoming month and where finances were. And hey, when was the last time that we paid this bill? Did we skip a month? And oh no, that was because we had a credit. And so that's why we didn't pay, or whatever. And just to have those natural conversations around your kids where they see you talking in a positive, calm, loving way about it instead of in a fighting way. They were around us and they could see that we were having that conversation, and they could hear that we were we're not throwing out numbers and talking about how much we make in front of our kids necessarily, but they could see the way that we were talking about it, that we have these regular conversations. They can see and hear that. And for them to hear that we're on the same page with things is a huge deal. Do I think that you're always going to be on the same page and you're never going to fight? No. But the more you talk about it, the less of a stress it brings. Does that make sense? Like if it's always a fight when you talk about money because it's so stressful, then maybe it needs to be brought up more, making sure that it's not in an accusing way, but in a let's figure this out together before the month starts so that we're not angry at each other at the month end, just things like that. They can see that.
Yeah, I wonder if it would be a good idea for them to see you talking about it in all of the different ways, like talking about money with an abundance mindset, but also in a neutral way as well, so that they can see how it is just an object that we've decided to give value to. Because the truth of the matter is that not everyone does see money positively. And so I think it's good for them to also look at money realistically and not just like everything will be fine all the time, no matter what you do. Because even though having an abundance mindset is a really great thing, it can be detrimental if it's taken overboard in a way that's like, no matter what we do and how much we spend and how much we give and whatever, we'll always make it through, if that makes sense. Like we still have to plan ahead and be realistic about it while having a positive mindset.
Absolutely. Those are conversations that we have with our kids, because sometimes they'll be like, well, why do you have to work so much? I wish we could just go and have fun all the time. And then I can have conversations about, dad and I bring in money so that we can afford to pay for the house. So we can afford to do this or that and can pay our bills, and we can get to do some of the fun things too. If we weren't working, we couldn't do A, B, and C, and that I think really helps them. Not that they have to know all the ins and outs, like this is how much we pay for our electric bill. No, but to just say work brings the money, which brings in the the things that you need. And it has to be based on, if I'm talking to my 6-year-old, I might have a different conversation than when I'm talking to my 15-year-old about it. But just letting them know like the cause and effect of working and saving and budgeting and how all of those things play into having security in a family. That it's not just, oh, if we want to go to McDonald's every night, then let's just go to McDonald's every night. It'll be fine. No, not only is that not healthy, but it will not be good for our financial situation. And I used to say to my kids, if we were saving up for something big and fun, like a vacation, I'd be like, do you want to go on this vacation or do you want to go to McDonald's? And that would help them to see that making those small little choices about our money, maybe Starbucks runs or a trip to Target to buy this toy, like those little purchases really add up and mean that we don't have the money to go on the big vacation that we were saving for. Or right now we're saving for a van. And so sometimes I'll say, that is not a priority for us right now. Right now we're saving for a van, and that might be a priority next. We'll just have to see. So when you were talking about mom and how she used to always say, come from abundance, it reminded me of a time when one of our brothers was visiting and he had come to help her out with things around the house, but then he also wanted to take us out to do something fun and he was going to pay for it. And we were just all so grateful that he would offer to do that. And he's like, it's just money. I can earn more of it next month and it's going to be fine. No big deal. We're having an experience with our family. And I think that that is great as long as you're you don't want to say that and just go into a bunch of debt. It's just money and, we'll pay it off later. I never want to say that, but if you have the cash to pay for it and it's something that you plan for, you can have that fun. And I think that it's really important to have that balance of making wise decisions with our money, but then also making sure that we're having fun with it. It's pretty common knowledge that there are two kinds of people, the spenders and the savers. And a lot of marriages have one of each. For me, I'm a saver, and it's really important for me to know that we have enough in savings and that we feel secure. My husband is a spender, and he needs to know that there are going to be some fun things happening. Like if I cut everything out of his life that was fun, he would suffocate, and that wouldn't be any good for him. So you have to make sure that you strike that balance to have the fun for the spenders and the savings and security. Well, really, if you're a spender or a saver, you got to make sure that you have security as well.
Just to take from a sociological term, constrained agency is something that we talk about in my major, and that just reminded me in this case, like how rules are really good with money, and it's good for you to have boundaries with yourself. So that way, because you've given yourself limits, you know that you have agency within those bounds, and it gives you a lot more freedom. And so a lot of times people think that if they're like too strict with their money, then they won't be able to experience those fun things. But I think it's the boundaries and the budget and things like that that allow you more freedom in the end.
Absolutely. And I've seen that in my own life where when my husband had just graduated from college and things were really tight in our budget and, you have a smaller income because you're just starting out, it was hard to see how it was going to bless us in the long term to make all of these sacrifices in the short term, like to never eat out and to not have money for the extras. But because we were so tight at that time and made it a big priority to get out of debt as quickly as possible, we had made some poor decisions. And so we needed to turn that around and correct it. And we didn't want to be stuck there forever. And so it was a really tight time. And sometimes we had to make hard decisions and tell our family no for fun things that they wanted to do with us. And it wasn't easy, but every day now, I'm so grateful that we made that sacrifice then, because now I feel completely comfortable saying, yeah, we can buy that charger for you on Amazon because yours broke. No problem. We can cover that. Whereas before, if I was in debt and I was like, oh, if I buy that charger for my kid that they need it, need is a relative term, but they're not going to be able to charge their phone without a charger, right? But if I'm buying that charger, then I can't pay off this debt. I'm just seeing the long-term benefits now of that short-term sacrifice of working really hard and diligently to pay off that debt quickly so that as our family grows, we have the financial stability to support the needs and wants as they're coming. So because we've kind of talked generalized, I kind of want to talk about the specifics of things that you can do that really make a difference. Some of the ideas I have for that and things that are important to me are making a budget and following it and tracking it throughout the month, and then meal planning and shopping with a grocery list so that you know what you're going to make ahead of time and you get only what you need at the store. That stops impulse buying, and that also stops you from fast food eating too much. I don't like to cook on the weekends, so I plan to make meals throughout the week. My husband makes meals on Sundays. So Friday, Saturday night, we'll either eat out or we'll do something like frozen foods that we just throw in the oven, and so that we can spend time and relax as a family on a Friday night. And so just plan that you might not want to cook on Friday nights and have that part of your plan rather than being like, oh, we got to go get something super expensive and blow our spending money because we didn't plan ahead. And then also, if you are in a situation where you need to get out of debt, just trying to throw every little bit you can at it while you can. Pay cash for every purchase you can besides a house. I know that that's not always feasible, but that's always the goal. Early on in our marriage, we felt like we had to take out loans for our cars. And then as we've learned more about finances and have been smarter with them, right now we're saving to pay for a car in cash. And so it's about learning those things and not being upset because early on in your marriage, you didn't know to do that and being angry at yourself that you went into that debt. Instead, just learn from those things and decide that next time you are going to save for the car and buy only what you can pay cash for. And then also really important is buying a house that you can afford. My theory of what that means is to make sure that you only get a 15-year fixed loan where the payments are no more than 25% of your income. Because expenses come up when you own a home that you don't really expect. The lawnmower breaks down and you have to go replace it. You need a weed whacker, and it seems like we replace our weed whacker every year. But home upkeep and repairs can be expensive. And I think a lot of banks will let you loan up to 40% of your income, but then you've got so much tied into the house payment that the other things that you need to run a family, run a home are not there when you need them. Do whatever you can to pay cash for your education. If you can't afford to pay cash or your parents can't pay for it, then apply for those scholarships like crazy. I looked on Pinterest and there are tons of them listed on Pinterest, and see what you qualify for. And some of them are just a monthly luck of the draw type of a scholarship. You don't have to submit an essay. You don't have to have any specific requirements. They just pull a name out. And it doesn't hurt to throw your name in there every month. But you can look at that as a part-time job that may pay you more than a $10 an hour job working at McDonald's or wherever. Just do whatever you can to not get out of school in debt. Cami, you've done that, right? You guys have paid for school as you've gone along, right?
Yeah, right now we are currently debt-free, which is super nice, and we're about to graduate soon. And I was nervous that we wouldn't be, and we might have to pay interest on loans that Tanner had gotten before we were married. But I feel like because we were diligent about saving and following the financial advice of teachers and people we've learned from, people like you, I've learned a lot from, and because we've kept a budget, that's been a huge thing. I know that's just like a phrase that's thrown around all the time, but keeping a budget has been helpful for me, not even just so that I stick within the budget necessarily, but just for me to see where my money is going, and it makes me super conscious of it. And then I feel really excited when I can put extra money towards our debt. So yeah, that's been really good for us. And it's been super exciting to be able to see the debt go down. And it was really liberating the day that we were finally debt free. I know that's not necessarily possible for everyone. Sometimes people go to really expensive colleges, and no matter how many hours you work and how much you save, whatever, it's never enough. But I think that education is really important, and hopefully it'll pay off someday. But for those of you that may feel like it's just a little bit out of reach, I feel like if you just maybe take one step towards doing something that would help you reach that goal a little better, like just take one step of self-control when you're wanting to buy something.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think that college choice has a lot to do with it because there are really expensive schools out there, and the cost of the education does not mean that the education is better necessarily. How many times do you go to your doctor's office and say, I only want to be your patient if you've gone to an Ivy League school for your medical school education? Like how many times have you asked, where did you get your degree? What school did you go to? We just don't ask that. We just say, did you go to school? Like, did you graduate? Did you, in the case of a doctor, are you board certified? Like, we want to know that they actually are legitimately a doctor, right? But aside from that, the name of the school doesn't really matter. And I think that some people can get really fixated and focused on like, oh, I have to go to an Ivy League school, or I have to go to this state school, even though it's $40,000 a year. And that's not necessarily true. I think that you can get a great education your first 2 years of college going to a junior college. And like I know in the state of Missouri where I live, they have what's called the A+ program, and it's really easy to get into it. And if you qualify for the A+ program, you go to 2 years of junior college free. That's something that I encourage my kids, whether they end up going off to BYU or something else, at least they have that option to get 2 years of their education for free. Looking at those ins and outs, planning your future, and asking your parents to be involved in it and give you advice on how you can save, where you can save, like whether it's living at home while you're in college or going to a more affordable school or things like that. There are lots of choices, and you're not tied down just because you've always loved a certain school. That doesn't mean you have to go there.
Yeah.
The next little piece of advice I have is when you're out of consumer debt, then it's important to start putting at least 15% of your income away for retirement every month, every year. You want to try to max out a Roth IRA first. You might have a work plan that does a 401k. And of course, try to put in whatever your company matches if they'll do a company match. For us, my husband's company matches up to a certain amount. And so we put in that much into his 401k. And then the rest to make up that 15%, we put into an individual Roth IRA for him and me. It kind of diversifies our retirement plan and makes sure that we're getting the most out of it. So I also have a list of absolutely nevers for me, and you might come to the same conclusions. Never own more than one property until your primary residence is paid off. Once your home is paid off, you can start saving to buy a home to rent out if you feel like rental properties are a good investment and something that you want to get into. But make sure that you fully do your research before deciding to go that route, because there are a lot of ins and outs and details. You might have to get a lawyer involved if you had renters that weren't paying and you have to get them kicked out. There are just a lot of laws and details wrapped up in rental properties. And I would never want to not be able to make my ends meet because I have a vacant home or a home where someone's not paying their rent. And so that's a personal rule for me. I would never buy a rental property until we're paid off on our house. Never ever gamble. Gambling is a tax on the poor. I have a friend whose husband is addicted to gambling, and he always says, once I win big, I'll never gamble again. And of course, everybody that's going there is expecting to win big and says they'll never come back once they've hit it big. But how often do they really hit it big? The statistic is so extremely low of people that actually win a lot of money or make more than they spend at the casinos or wherever they're gambling. And it has to be that way for the companies to make money and to be able to offer that much money that someone would win. It's not going to make your financial situation better. It's just going to make it worse and worse. And then another never, ever, ever is never get a payday loan or a title loan, because these are also, they call them a tax on the poor, or they prey on the poor people as well. I know a family that borrowed $300 so that they could have a decent Christmas. They could have a nice meal for their family and presents for their kids for Christmas. And they ended up having to pay $1,200 back on that $300 borrow. And that is like your last resort. If it's either I will get kicked out of my home or I get this loan, then maybe, but I say run away screaming. The interest rate is so extremely high. It's not worth it. Do not ever do it.
I think that this is a great point to make, especially as it's coming to the holidays. This is a time I feel like people are super focused on money because this is probably the time of year when people spend the most money. But I just love that we can make a huge emphasis in our personal lives and for our families more on the time that we spend together, and like figure out what our real priorities are other than throwing money at things or deciding that gifts are the most important thing. And I love to give gifts. I really love it because it makes me feel happy, and I think it's a really wonderful thing. But just the huge focus that there is on money, I think it's great to kind of take a step back and figure out where your priorities are.
There is so much that you can do that doesn't require a lot of money. one idea that we have for this year is to get our kids one gift and their stocking, and then have family adventures planned out for this next year. So we want to do a manila envelope for every month of the year. And every month at the beginning of the month, we get to open it up as a family, and they get to discover what adventure we're going to do that month and what day we have it planned for. And so we'll put those dates on the calendar and decide, like, one day we might do a night in a hotel where we swim and order pizza and just be together as a family getting a hotel here in town. Or we might go ziplining, or we might go to a museum that we don't go to very often, or, things like that. That's really well-rounded and trying out new things that we've never experienced before, as well as some of our old-time favorites. And just it being more about family togetherness and making those a priority rather than more things that we're bringing into our lives, which goes back to what we talked about a few weeks ago on minimalism. I don't want more stuff in my house. I want my kids to have experiences and bonding opportunities. So I just want to make the point that I don't think that everyone's situation is cut and dry and the same, and that all rules apply to everyone. There's a lot that goes into financial family planning or individual financial planning. And it goes back to those 3 different ways that people look at money, and the way that they were raised, and the way that you were taught from a young age to think about and treat money. There are factors like this and what's important to you. And there are a lot of factors that go into what is important to you. Do you want to be home more with your family, or do you want to work a lot of overtime so you make more money? Do you want a small house so you can travel more, or a big house so you can host a lot of company? How much schooling do you want to go through to get the job that you want? And will that schooling be worth the investment of the time and money that you put into it? I used to babysit for a veterinarian that told me she wishes she had never become a veterinarian, which surprised me. But she said that she had the student loan debt of a medical student without the matching income of a medical school graduate. It's especially important to be on the same page with your spouse about your budget and your money, and make compromises and sacrifices for what the other person might want, and work together. And doing the finances together takes a lot of time and discipline, and it's going to pay out big dividends in the long run, just building that relationship that I talked about earlier. If you fight about money, or you feel like you just can't get a handle on it or make some real progress, or if you feel like you haven't stuck to the plans that you've made in the past, it may be time to get some outside help. There are programs that you can take as a couple or individually if it's just you. But if you are a couple and you want to take a class, or you want to go see a financial coach or something like that, make sure that you go together. Because you don't want to go and learn all this information and become educated about this and come home and tell your spouse, and they're not on the same page with you. They haven't learned, they haven't gotten the inspiration and the motivation to move forward with it like you have. So make sure you go together, and you can find a class that's more generalized to what you should do to start, or you can look to a financial coach like me and get more one-on-one individualized. Let's look at your budget, help you set up your plan for your family, and talk about all the details of what's specific to you. However you feel like your family needs to handle things, it can definitely be something that you take to prayer and ask God to guide you in the best way to handle your money and to work it out together. I really think that He can give you some guidance in that area.
So the biggest takeaways that I'm getting from what we've talked about today is that we can all learn from our mistakes. We can look at the past month or the history of our lives with money and see where we can make improvements and do better this next year or the next month or even just tomorrow. But it's really important not to live in shame or guilt over the decisions that we're all making with money, because that isn't something that would benefit us. I say us because we're all still learning. And I think it's true that we've all made poor choices with money. But yeah, we can all feel hopeful about the future. And I think we can all choose to feel hopeful about our futures with money.
Yeah, for sure. And I just wanted to end with a spiritual thought. And I found this on a website called moneycrashers.com. And I'll put the link to it in the show notes. But she talked about a couple of Bible verses that I wanted to mention that talk about money. And the first one is Luke 14:28-30. And it says, "For which of you intending to build a tower sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it? lest haply after he hath laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. I had never read that before finding it on this website, but I really like that because it shows us how important it is to look at the beginning to the end, to have the big picture in mind as we're making our monthly budget and as we're planning our lives, to say, we want to be able to retire with money enough to not have to work until we're 80 or whatever. We don't want to have to rely on the government to give us our Social Security check every month to live off of. But we can look at those big picture things and then also hone into the details of, we have to build the foundation of getting out of debt and having a savings and then building on it to like pay off your mortgage and save college for your kids. It's a progression thing. And the end result being that you are able to give generously and that you're able to leave a legacy to your family of prosperity and of positivity when it comes to money. And so I love that scripture. And then the other scripture that goes along with that is Proverbs 21:5. And it says, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. I have a story, and I've probably shared it before, but my husband and I, when we were first married, decided to go on a cheap vacation where all we had to do was sit through a timeshare pitch and then we could enjoy the vacation. We sat through the timeshare pitch and had promised ourselves before going in, well, we're not going to get it. No matter what they say, we're not going to get it. Well, they pressured us and they pushed us and they flowered it up and made it sound so wonderful and amazing. And we could go on all these trips around the world with our kids and it'll be planned out and we'll have to do it because we have that set aside every year. And we felt like that was one of the biggest financial mistakes that we have made in our marriage, probably the biggest one. And it was a big cost to do it up front and a huge struggle to finally, just this past year, we got out of it. We spent a lot of money working with lawyers to get out of this timeshare, and we learned it the hard way. And we learned that haste leads to poverty. If you're ever pushed into situations where you need to think fast and you need to act now or it's never going to come again, you know that that is a pressure tactic, and to step back and say, if we decide in 5 years that we still want a timeshare, then we can do it then, but we're not going to make that decision today. Whatever it is, any kind of especially big purchases, you want to step back and say, I don't want to jump into this house and just buy it because it's the only one on the block that's available and I want to live in this neighborhood. If it's a pressure situation, there's always another option and there's always another opportunity that's done with diligence and wisdom in a methodical way rather than a pushed into it kind of a way. Anyway, I just wanted to leave you with that thought that, again, diligence leads to prosperity as haste leads to poverty. I really hope that we have inspired you to want to have that diligence and conviction to leave a legacy of positivity and abundance when it comes to money for your family, and to decide as a family how you're going to move forward with your finances, and to never tear each other down or to be in a place of anger or regret over those things, but to just learn from the mistakes and realize that everything we do has a purpose. God has a plan and a purpose for all parts of our lives. And if we didn't make the mistakes, we wouldn't have anything to learn from it and we wouldn't become stronger people in the end. And so look at the mistakes you've made in the past as learning experiences and show God that you learned the lesson by not making the same mistake again. And that's all that we can do in life. Thank you so much, Cami, for joining me with this conversation. I really enjoy talking about money, so I'm glad that you joined me today. And we will talk to you next week. Thanks. Bye.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. If it resonates with you, the greatest compliment you could give is to share it with a friend who might benefit from it as well. Check out A Difference for One on Instagram for additional content. And if you have any questions, comments, a topic you'd like to hear about, or if you'd be interested in a free mini coaching session, send an email to adifferenceforone@gmail.com.